That afternoon, I came home from work early. As I reached the top of the stairs to the second floor, I saw Isabel, our new housekeeper, stepping out of my and my husband's bedroom. Her blouse was rumpled, her hair a mess, and her face was so pale it looked as if all the blood had been drained from it. And my husband, Mike, was slumped on the floor, panting, next to a bed with one of its legs snapped clean off. The comforter and sheets were in a heap, the nightstand was knocked askew, and the air in the room was so thick with tension it felt like someone had thrown a bucket of ice water on my dignity. If I had screamed right then, no one would have blamed me. If I had slapped the housekeeper, people would have understood. If I had turned to my husband and sobbed, "How could you do this to me?" it would have seemed perfectly reasonable. But strangely, I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, listening to my own heart pound. Each beat as heavy as a sledgehammer in the dead of night. Because with the intuition of a woman who had lived in this house for 13 years, I knew the scene before me wasn't a simple case of betrayal. It felt like a trap. A trap designed not just to ruin my husband, but to drive me out of this house under a cloud of utter humiliation. My name is Jessica Miller, and I was 39 years old that year. To outsiders, my life was something to envy. I had a husband who was an operations manager for a major dental supply company, a sweet 12-year-old son named Leo, a 3-story townhouse in Queens, and 4 successful wellness spas I had built myself across New York City. It sounds glamorous, but to get there, I had started in a tiny rented room with just 2 massage tables. Back then, clients had to park next door. When it rained, water would seep under the door, and I'd be mopping the floor while joking with a client. "Sorry about that, today's session includes a complimentary water feature." I'd say it with a smile, but many nights I went home wanting to cry. I worked from morning till night. My hands used to peel from being in water and oils all day, and my back ached from leaning over clients. Some days, lunch was a sandwich scarfed down behind the reception desk. But I kept going. I believed that if a woman had her own skills, her own career, life could knock her around. But it couldn't easily knock her down. My husband, Mike, is 4 years older than me. In public, and at work, he's confident and decisive. His subordinates respect him, and his bosses trust him. Everyone who met him told me how lucky I was to have married such a good gentleman. No drinking, no gambling, no womanizing. But sometimes, Mike's gentleness was the kind that hurt the person closest to him. As commanding as he was at his company, at home, in front of his mother, Eleanor Harrison, he'd go completely limp, like overcooked spaghetti. Whatever his mother said, he was afraid of upsetting her. When she was angry, he went silent. When she blamed me, he'd bow his head. When she went too far, he would just pull me into our room and whisper, "Just let it go, Jess. She's old. That's just how she is, there's no real malice in it." I heard that line so many times I could recite it in my sleep. I used to joke bitterly to myself that if my life were a book, the title would have to be Just Let It Go, Jess. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, was 68 that year. She'd been a widow for a long time, and Mike was her only child. To her, he wasn't just a son, he was the pillar of her life, her pride and joy, the one who would carry on the Harrison name. As for me, even after 13 years of marriage, giving her a grandson, and managing the household, in her eyes, I was still just somebody else's daughter. She never berated me with coarse language. She was more subtle than that. She used quiet words that cut deep. In front of relatives, she'd often say with a half-smile, "Jessica is very good at making money, so she tends to have her own way of doing things around here." Just one sentence, but everyone who heard it understood. I was the daughter-in-law who used her money to dominate the family. Once, during dinner, I had just served a pot roast, mashed potatoes, and a green bean casserole she loved. She looked at me and said, "Some people are out all day, smelling of lotions and oils, money coming and going, who knows if it's clean or not. It's a good thing there's an old woman here to look after the house, otherwise it would feel as cold as a motel room." I was holding my fork, and I just had to put it down. My son, Leo, sitting next to me, looked from me to his grandmother with wide, confused eyes. I was afraid he'd be upset, so I forced a smile. "Mom, try the roast. I made it just the way you like it." Eleanor didn't answer. She just cut a piece of meat, placed it on Mike's plate, and said coolly, "You eat, dear. You work so hard all day. The man of the house is the one who carries the real weight. I don't mind that men carry the heavy weight. I just felt sad that the small things I did every single day were never considered work. The utility bills, the cost of her blood pressure medication, Leo's tutoring fees, the air conditioner repair, the flowers for the mantelpiece on my late father-in-law's birthday, most of it came out of my pocket. But whenever the house came up, Eleanor would say, "This is a Harrison house. A daughter-in-law living here should know her place." That three-story townhouse was once my pride. The ground floor had a spacious living room with a beautiful oak table my father-in-law had loved. The second floor had our master bedroom and Leo's room. The top floor had a small den and a patio where Eleanor kept her holiday poinsettias. From the outside, it was a beautiful, well-kept home. Anyone who passed by would say we were a blessed family. But inside, that house often felt like a beautiful coat lined with tiny needles. Not enough to draw blood, but every movement was a small prick of pain. I used to think, just let it go for the sake of peace. If my mother-in-law is difficult, I'll be softer. If my husband is caught in the middle, I'll be more understanding. My son is young and needs a home with his father and grandparents. I shouldn't keep score. But in life, yielding at the right time brings peace. Yielding at the wrong time makes people think you have no backbone. The more successful my business became, the more Eleanor resented it. The day I opened my fourth spa in Brooklyn, she started making comments about me getting a big head. My clients were loyal, and my staff respected me, but when I came home, she would scrutinize my every move. If I came home late, she'd say I was neglecting my family. If I came home early, she'd imply business was slow. If I bought nice things for everyone, she'd say I was showing off. If I didn't, she'd call me cheap. Sometimes I wondered, do people dislike me because I'm wrong, or is it just that nothing I do will ever be right in their eyes? Mike knew everything. He wasn't blind, but he always chose to stand in the middle. And his middle was a strange place. It always tilted heavily toward his mother. He'd say he loved me, but every time I needed him to say one fair word, he'd fall silent. He'd say family was important, but the family he spoke of often only included his mother. My son and I felt like an add-on. I had lived like this for 13 years. I made sure the house was warm and bright, that there was a hot meal on the table, that holidays were properly observed. I sent money to help my own parents but never forgot to buy vitamins for my mother-in-law. I taught my son to respect his elders, even when I myself was often choked with unspoken words by my own elder. I kept thinking that if I just lived decently, one day Eleanor would understand. But perhaps I was naive, because in that house, long before Isabel arrived, a crack had already formed. That crack was in my mother-in-law's resentment, in my husband's silence, and in my own prolonged patience. I just wanted peace and quiet, to be a stable foundation for our family. I never imagined a toxic storm had already started to brew, long before I even noticed. And by the time I did, a leg on our marriage bed had already snapped. My trust in my family had broken with it, a quiet snap, but a pain that went straight to the bone. The house I shared with my in-laws hadn't always been so grand. When I first married into the family, it was an old, single-story row house in a wide alley in Queens. You could just about fit a small car down it. The neighborhood was bustling. In the morning, you'd hear the rattle of the subway, at noon, the call of a hot dog vendor, and in the evening, the smell of roasted chicken and fried onions would drift from every kitchen. The house itself was tired, its walls a faded yellow, its roof low. It was an oven in the summer and leaked like a sieve in the winter. I remember so clearly that first year of marriage, every time it rained hard, I'd have to place plastic tubs in the middle of the living room to catch the drips. My father-in-law, Arthur Harrison, was still alive then. He'd see me on my hands and knees mopping the floor and sigh, "Jessica, I've got to do something about this house. I feel terrible having you and Mike, and a grandchild on the way, living like this." Arthur was a man of few words, but he was decent and fair. He never treated me like an outsider. Every morning, he'd brew a pot of strong coffee and sit on the stoop with the newspaper. When I left for work, he'd always call out, "Have you eaten, kid? Your mother-in-law bought some bagels." Just a simple question, but for a daughter-in-law far from her own family, it meant the world. When I was about 4 months pregnant with Leo, the talk of renovating the house became serious. Mike had just been promoted to junior manager, so his salary wasn't high. My first spa had just opened, and every penny I made went back into rent, equipment, and payroll. My in-laws owned the house, but they didn't have much cash. Eleanor initially suggested just patching things up, fix the roof, and that's it. We do what we can afford. We don't go into debt, she'd say. It sounded reasonable, but the house was too far gone. The wiring was ancient and faulty, the bathroom was damp and moldy, a long crack ran down the back wall, and the foundation was lower than the street. So heavy rains would flood the ground floor. A patch job would only last a few years. If we wanted to stay long-term, it had to be done right. My parents, who lived upstate, found out. My dad, Frank Miller, had spent his life running an apple orchard. My mom, Carol, had a small stall at the local farmer's market. They weren't wealthy, but their love for their daughter ran deep. One Sunday afternoon, they drove down to the city, bringing a fresh-baked apple pie, some vegetables from their garden, and a bag of Honeycrisp apples. After dinner, my dad placed a stack of bank papers on the table and said to my father-in-law, "Arthur, the kids are living with you. This house is a long-term home for my daughter and my grandson. My wife and I have some savings, and we'd like to contribute to make sure the renovation is solid. It's not a gift to anyone, just our way of helping the kids build a proper nest." I was choked with emotion. I knew that money was my parents' sweat and tears, the long, hot summers my dad spent in the orchard, the early mornings my mom spent at the market. That money didn't fall from the sky. After much discussion, my parents transferred a total of $50,000, split into 4 installments. The first was to tear down the old structure and reinforce the foundation. The second was to frame the new floors. The third was for plumbing, electrical, and drywall. The last was to finish the interiors, the patio, the doors, and the painting. I still have all the bank statements. The senders' names, Frank M. Miller and Carol T. Miller. The recipient was sometimes Mike, sometimes a joint account we used to pay the contractors. I kept every receipt for lumber, wiring, pipes, tiles in a blue folder. I was meticulous not because I suspected anyone, but because I was a business owner. Money in, money out, it all had to be documented. When it comes to money, verbal agreements are a recipe for resentment. My father-in-law was even more careful. He handwrote a letter acknowledging that Mike's in-laws had contributed $50,000 towards the renovation and expansion of the property. The letter was signed by him, Mike, me, my parents, and a cousin from my husband's side, Uncle Jim, who acted as a witness. It was even notarized. After signing, Arthur put down the pen, looked at Eleanor, and said, "Money has to be clear. When our in-laws show us such kindness, we have to live right by them. Let's not give Jessica a reason to ever feel wronged in this house." Eleanor didn't object at the time. She just sat there, her hands fiddling with her reading glasses, her expression unreadable. I thought her silence meant agreement. Only later did I understand that some silences aren't acceptance, they're just memories being filed away for later. The renovation took nearly 8 months. The day they finished the roof, we had a small celebration. My mom brought down a huge pot of chili and a pan of cornbread. Eleanor made a big salad. My father-in-law raised a glass and said with a gentle smile, "New house. Time for any old hardships to find their way out the door." I never forgot that. When the house was finished, everyone was thrilled. The ground floor had bright new tiles and a much larger living room. The second floor had a proper master bedroom and a room for Leo. The third floor had a den and a sunny patio. The first time I stepped into our new bedroom, painted a soft cream color, I placed a hand on my pregnant belly and felt tears welling up. I truly felt I had a home. But life can be cruel. What I saw as a home, someone else saw as an asset. After my father-in-law passed away from a stroke, the house began to change color in Eleanor's words. At first, it was just little comments. "This was Arthur's house. We have to keep it safe for his grandson." I didn't think much of it. It was true. But gradually, her words became more frequent and sharper. Once, during a family gathering for Arthur's memorial, I rushed home from the spa, quickly changed, and went down to the kitchen to help. When everyone was having coffee after the meal, a cousin complimented the beautiful, spacious house. Eleanor glanced at me and said with a smirk, "It's a Harrison house. The Harrison family lives here, so of course it has to be respectable." I was carrying out a tray of desserts and stopped in my tracks. She didn't mention my parents, not a word about the $50,000, not a whisper about the months I spent, pregnant, picking out every tile and doorknob. Later that day, I spoke to Mike privately. "Mike, I'm not trying to claim the house, but it hurts when your mom talks like that." My parents' contribution wasn't small. Mike rubbed his forehead, his voice tired. "She's old, Jess. It's just a habit. Don't let it get to you." I gave a cold, internal laugh. One person's habit is another person's wound. I kept the notarized letter from my father-in-law in an old wooden box, along with the bank statements and receipts. I never brought it out to argue or wave it in my mother-in-law's face. I thought if you have to pull out paperwork to prove your worth in a family, things have already soured. Besides, I still trusted Mike. I believed my husband knew my efforts, and he knew the decency of my family. That trust, it turned out, would be what hurt me the most. Eleanor increasingly treated the house as her exclusive territory. Every time I suggested fixing a leaky faucet, changing the curtains, or buying a new bookshelf for Leo, she'd say, "You have to ask me before you do anything. You can't just change things in this house whenever you feel like it." I held my tongue. I told myself that old people are often possessive, and I was young, so why fight over it? I continued to pay the bills, handle holiday preparations, and buy her medication. Every year on Arthur's birthday, I'd still place a bouquet of his favorite lilies on the mantel. I still called him Dad when I spoke of him, and I'd still ask him to watch over our family and keep us at peace. But the more I yielded, the more I felt like a ghost in that house. I was needed when money was required, when labor was needed, when a holiday meal had to be cooked. But when it came to the right to be respected, I instantly became an outsider. There's an old saying, don't bite the hand that feeds you. In my husband's house, everyone enjoyed the comforts, but the foundation my parents had helped pour was intentionally ignored. I didn't know then that this very house would become the bait that would lure out greed, and that the letter my father-in-law left behind, which I thought was just a memento of a good man, would one day become a crucial piece of evidence to save my and my son's honor. Isabel Garcia walked into our lives on a gray afternoon in early July, after a heavy rainstorm. The front steps were still wet, and yellow leaves from the trees had scattered onto the stairs. I remember it clearly because I had just come from my Brooklyn spa, still smelling of lemongrass and eucalyptus, and I was carrying a bag with a fresh supply of my mother-in-law's blood pressure medication. As I opened the door, I saw Eleanor in the living room with a strange woman. She was in her 30s, petite, with dark skin and hair tied back in a low ponytail. She wore a faded floral blouse, clean but clearly old. In her hands was a worn canvas duffel bag, the kind people use when they travel for work, probably containing nothing more than a few changes of clothes. Seeing me, Eleanor spoke immediately, her tone final, not consultative. "Jessica, this is Isabel. From now on, she'll be living here to help with the house and to look after me. I'm getting older, and you're out all day. We need someone." I was taken aback. Not because I was against hiring help. In fact, for years I had suggested hiring a cleaning service, but Eleanor always refused, saying she didn't want strangers in the house. Yet here she was, bringing someone to live in, without so much as a phone call to me or Mike. I looked at the woman. She immediately stood up and gave a quick, deferential nod. "Hello, Mrs. Harrison. I'm Isabel Garcia. Mama Eleanor was kind enough to offer me a Mama Eleanor was kind enough to offer me a job because of my situation. I'm not asking for much, ma'am. Just a stable place to eat and sleep, and I'll be very grateful." The words, Mama Eleanor, came out of her mouth so smoothly that I did a double take. She had just met my mother-in-law, and was already calling her, Mama, a term more intimate than anything I used after 13 years. I felt a prickle of annoyance but maintained my composure. "Well, if Mom has already agreed, you can stay for a trial period. The work isn't heavy, but my husband's and my bedroom, and our personal papers, are off limits. If you need anything, ask me, or my mother-in-law." Isabel nodded eagerly. "Yes, ma'am, I know my place. I've worked as a domestic for years. I understand the rules of the house. You can rest assured. I may be poor, but I'm not careless." Eleanor immediately chimed in. "This one speaks well. People who've known hardship are more sensible. It's not easy to find honest help these days." The comment was ostensibly a compliment for Isabel, but the needle was aimed at me. I heard it, but I didn't respond. I found out later that Eleanor met Isabel at Elmhurst Hospital. Eleanor was visiting an old friend in the general ward, and Isabel was a paid caregiver for the patient in the next bed. She knew how to help an elderly person sit up, how to mix formula at the right temperature, how to give a shoulder rub, how to brush hair, and how to ask gently about their day. For someone old, sick, and lonely, a person with such a sweet demeanor is an easy comfort. Isabel also shared her sad life story. From a poor town, married young, husband died in an accident, leaving a young child with her parents back home. She'd come to the city and done all sorts of jobs, from washing dishes to caring for the sick. Her story was just sad enough to evoke sympathy, just pitiful enough to make people let down their guard. Eleanor, who had always been more compassionate towards strangers than her own family, was completely won over. After just a few conversations at the hospital, she was convinced Isabel was poor but virtuous. The first night Isabel stayed, Eleanor had her set up in the small storage room off the kitchen. I gave Isabel a clean set of sheets and a new pillow. She took them with both hands, her eyes welling up. "Thank you, ma'am. It's been so long since I've had a proper bed in a decent house like this." Hearing that, I'll admit, my heart softened. Having come from nothing myself, I understood the feeling of needing a foothold. I even told the manager at my main spa to make sure Isabel's salary was transferred on time every month, so she'd never have to ask. In the beginning, Isabel was a model employee. She was up at 5:30 a.m., sweeping the patio and mopping the living room. The moment Eleanor opened her bedroom door, a glass of warm water was waiting. Her blood pressure pills were sorted into a weekly organizer, labeled morning, noon, and night. For lunch, she'd cook squash soup and baked fish, all of Eleanor's favorites. In the evening, she'd give Eleanor a shoulder rub and a warm Epsom salt foot soak. Eleanor was ecstatic. She praised her to everyone. "That Isabel, she's so thoughtful. She's not even family, but she takes better care of me than some people in this house." I knew she was talking about me, but I stayed quiet. I was busy. My day started with dropping Leo at school, then checking in at a spa, dealing with inventory or a client complaint, meeting with staff, and then rushing home to think about dinner. I couldn't give my mother-in-law a shoulder rub every night like Isabel, but not being able to do one thing doesn't mean you lack care. Isabel was clever. In front of me, she was always respectful. If she saw me carrying groceries, she'd rush to help. If I was loading the dishwasher, she'd insist on taking over. Her mouth was always full of, "Mrs. Harrison, you work so hard," and "You're so amazing, ma'am. If I could be half as successful as you, I'd be so happy." But behind my back, when it was just her and Eleanor, she knew how to stir the pot. Once, I passed the kitchen and heard Isabel saying softly, "Mama, don't be sad. In this day and age, when a daughter-in-law makes her own money, her heart isn't what it used to be. They may not say it, but they don't see their husband's family as their priority anymore." Eleanor sighed. "I just worry that one day she'll have complete control over Mike. This house was built by his father, and if it falls into her hands, what's left of the Harrison name?" Isabel's voice dropped to a sweet, syrupy whisper. "Don't say that, Mama. You still have your grandson. What belongs to the family must be kept for the family's blood. An outsider, no matter how good, is still an outsider." I was standing right outside the kitchen door, holding a bag of oranges I'd just bought, and I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to walk in and ask her, "Then what have I been for the past 13 years? But looking at Eleanor sitting there, at Isabel massaging her shoulders, I swallowed my words. I knew if I confronted them then, Eleanor would accuse me of eavesdropping, Isabel would burst into tears, and Mike would just sigh and call me oversensitive. Since Isabel's arrival, the rhythm of the house changed quickly. She held the keys to the pantry. She managed Eleanor's medication schedule. She knew which dishes Eleanor liked, which neighbors she disliked, what time Mike left for work, and what time I usually came home late. One afternoon, I came home to find Isabel and Eleanor looking through an old photo album. Isabel pointed at a picture of Mike as a child and smiled. "Mike was such a handsome little boy, wasn't he, Mama? You could tell even then he was destined for big things." Eleanor beamed with pride. "He's my only son. I live for him." Isabel glanced up at me, a flicker in her eyes, before looking back down. That glance was so quick, but it sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the look of a humble housekeeper. It was the look of someone who had found her anchor in this house. I started paying more attention. Isabel never contradicted Eleanor. When Eleanor said daughters-in-law today are difficult, Isabel would nod. When she complained that I was always working, Isabel would sigh sympathetically. When she brought up the Harrison house, Isabel would immediately agree. She didn't have to slander me directly, all she needed was to add one affirming sentence each day, one sympathetic sigh at every meal. My mother-in-law's heart, already narrow when it came to me, grew narrower still. They say a steady drip can wear away stone. Isabel was that steady drip. No thunder, no lightning, but she was seeping into every crack in my family. At the time, I still didn't know what her ultimate goal was. I only felt a vague, unsettling anxiety, like smelling a faint whiff of gas in the kitchen before you see the flame. And I never could have imagined that the woman who once tearfully thanked me for a clean pillow would one day use my own bedroom to stage the most sordid drama of my life. Ever since Isabel started, the house was, admittedly, cleaner. The floors were always gleaming, the sink rarely had a dirty dish, the plants on the patio were watered regularly, and the laundry was hung with military precision. This gave Eleanor even more reason to praise her. Every morning when I came downstairs, I'd hear her say, "Isabel was up before dawn cleaning the house. Poor people who are hardworking are such a refreshing sight." Another time, as I was pouring a glass of water, she added, "Not like some people, who probably don't even know where the broom is kept in their own home." I looked at the broom, standing neatly behind the kitchen door, and wanted to laugh. Not from joy, but from the sheer absurdity of it all. People can so quickly forget the years you spent sweeping floors, cooking meals, washing dishes, and caring for them when they were sick. The moment someone new arrives, all your past efforts are wiped away like dust from a tabletop. I didn't argue. I kept going to work, taking care of Leo, and ordering breakfast for the family when I was too busy to cook. But I noticed Isabel moving through the house with an unnerving degree of familiarity. She knew which cabinet held Eleanor's special tea, which of Mike's shirts were his favorite, that Leo hated onions, and even where the spare keys to every room were hung. One Sunday afternoon, I came home earlier than usual because a client cancelled. As I walked up to the second floor, I saw that the door to our bedroom was slightly ajar, and I could hear a faint rustling sound from inside. I stopped and called out, "Who's in there?" Isabel emerged, holding a basket of laundry. She looked startled for a split second, but quickly composed herself and looked down. "Oh, Mrs. Harrison. I was just getting some clothes to wash. Your mother-in-law said there were a few shirts in here that needed to be aired out so they wouldn't get musty." I looked at the key in her hand. It was the spare key to our bedroom. I normally kept it in a drawer in the living room console, for emergencies. I had never given it to Isabel. Trying to keep my voice steady, I asked, "Who gave you that key?" Isabel mumbled, "Mama Eleanor did. She said we're all family here, and that I should know how to tidy up everywhere." I stepped into the room. The bed was made, the closets were closed, but the feeling of my privacy being violated was deeply unsettling. A couple's bedroom is where you keep personal documents, private belongings. A housekeeper, no matter how trusted, shouldn't have free access. I turned back to Isabel. "Next time you need to come into my room, you ask me first. If there's laundry, I'll leave it outside the door. This is a private space." Isabel immediately bowed her head, her eyes welling up with tears instantly. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't know you were so particular. I'm just used to doing what my employer tells me to do. I didn't mean anything by it." Before I could respond, Eleanor came up the stairs, likely drawn by our voices. The moment she saw Isabel's downcast face, her own expression soured. "What's going on? Why the long face?" Isabel rushed to explain. "It's nothing, Mama. I just made a mistake by coming in to get the laundry. Mrs. Harrison wasn't happy, and I've already apologized." Eleanor turned to me, her voice sharp. "It's just a bedroom, not a bank vault. The girl is poor, but she's honest. You don't have to be so suspicious of everyone." I took a deep breath. "Mom, I'm not accusing her of stealing. I'm just saying a private room requires permission to enter. That's common courtesy." She scoffed. "Common courtesy? This is a family home. You've been a daughter-in-law for over a decade, and you still draw lines, my room, your room. How can anyone feel close to you when you live like that?" Her words made my face flush, but I didn't want to argue in front of Isabel. I didn't want to air our dirty laundry for a newcomer to see. I just said, "I would like the key to my room back, Mom. I can take care of my own things." Eleanor didn't give it back. She slipped the key into the pocket of her housecoat and said coldly, "It's my house, so I'll keep the keys. You're gone all day. If no one cleans up, you'll just complain it's a mess." Behind her, Isabel stood with tears streaming down her face, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch into a faint, triumphant smirk. It was so subtle that if I hadn't been looking closely, I would have thought I imagined it. That night, dinner was tense. Leo sat next to me, silently eating. Mike came home late and immediately sensed the atmosphere. Eleanor served him a piece of fish and said, "Eat up, dear. You work so hard, only to come home to arguments about private rooms and public rooms. So stressful." Mike looked at me. I put down my fork and stated plainly, "Today, I found Isabel in our room using the spare key. I just suggested she ask for permission next time." Before Mike could reply, Eleanor slammed her chopsticks on the table. "I gave it to her. Am I not allowed to hold a key in my own house anymore?" "It's different when you hold it versus when the housekeeper does," I replied. Isabel, who was standing near the kitchen, immediately stepped forward. "Mrs. Harrison, please don't let me be the cause of a fight between you and your mother. If you don't trust me, I can leave tomorrow. I may be poor, but I have my pride." Her plea was perfectly timed, making her look like the innocent victim. Eleanor turned to comfort her. "No one is kicking you out. You stay right here with me. Good people have a place here." Then she looked at me and said slowly, "Women who make a lot of money get like this. They think their money is more important than family harmony. But you should remember, you can have all the money in the world. But if you have a narrow heart, you'll only push people away. I felt a lump in my throat. I wanted to ask her who had paid for her medication for the last decade, who cooked for every family memorial, who paid to fix the leaking roof. But I looked at Leo, his head bowed over his plate, his small shoulders hunched, and I said nothing. Mike placed a piece of broccoli on my plate and whispered, "Just eat. We'll talk about it later." I looked at the broccoli and wanted to laugh. He was always like this. When I needed a word of justice, he offered me a vegetable, as if a small gesture could erase all the hurt. After dinner, I went up to our room. Mike followed, closing the door behind him with a sigh. "I know you're upset, but Mom is old, and Isabel is just the help. Don't be so stressed about it." I looked at him. "Do you not see the problem? It's not about the laundry. It's about our private space, our bedroom, and someone having a key to come and go as they please without asking. Today, it's clothes. What if tomorrow it's our personal documents?" He was silent for a moment, then said, "We don't have anything to hide, do we?" I gave a bitter laugh. "Not having anything to hide doesn't mean you give everyone a key to your life." He looked exhausted. "All I want is a peaceful dinner where we can all sit together." His words, so softly spoken, hit me hard. I realized the peaceful dinner he wanted was bought with my silence. His mother could say whatever she wanted, and I had to endure it. The housekeeper could cross boundaries, and I had to endure it. My husband could stand by and do nothing, and I had to endure it, just to make his life easier. A house where only one person has to endure is not peaceful. It's just injustice disguised as tranquility. That night, I checked the drawers. My personal documents, social security card, marriage certificate, old contracts were all there, but the sense of unease was palpable. It sat in my chest like a slow-burning ember. I looked at the keys hanging by the door and thought, the tree wants calm, but the wind will not cease. Except this time, the wind wasn't just blowing outside. It had found its way into my own bedroom. That Thursday afternoon, the sky over New York had been overcast since noon. At my wellness spa in Brooklyn, we had just finished with a block of clients when a burning smell came from the back. An employee reported a small short circuit in one of the water heaters. I immediately shut off the power, rescheduled the remaining appointments for the next day, and called an electrician. I told my manager, Sarah, to personally apologize to each client and offer them a complimentary service on their next visit. By the time I was done, it was a little after 4 o'clock. That morning, Mike had been coughing a lot and looked pale. On my way home, I stopped at a local deli and picked up a large container of chicken noodle soup and some fresh oranges. It's the simple way a woman shows she cares when her husband is sick. She brings him hot soup. I got home around 4:40 p.m. The front gate was ajar, not locked as it usually was. Isabel's sandals were kicked off haphazardly on the front steps, one upright, one overturned. The living room was empty, except for a half-finished cup of tea on the coffee table. I called out, "Isabel? Mom, where are you?" No one answered. I set the soup on the kitchen counter. Just then, a loud thud echoed from the second floor, like something heavy had crashed into wood and then fallen to the ground. My heart leaped into my throat. I thought Eleanor had fallen and rushed up the stairs. The closer I got, the more clearly I could hear panicked, heavy breathing. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar. I put my hand on the doorknob, and just as I did, it swung open from the inside. Isabel stood before me. Her blouse was rumpled, the top 2 buttons undone. Her hair was a tangled mess, and her face was sheet white, her lips trembling. As soon as she saw me, she flinched and took a step back. "Mrs. Harrison. What are you doing home so early?" In that context, her question was like a knife twist. This was my house, my bedroom. Yet the person who needed to explain was asking me why I was there. I didn't answer. I pushed past her and walked into the room. Mike was slumped on the floor, his back against the side of the bed. His face was ashen, sweat beaded on his forehead, and he was clutching his chest. The bed itself was tilted precariously, one of the legs completely broken. The comforter was crumpled on the floor, a pillow was tossed aside, and the nightstand was shoved out of place. In that instant, my ears started ringing. I looked at my husband, at Isabel, and at the broken bed. The scene was so perfectly staged that all it needed was a dramatic sob to become the talk of the entire neighborhood. The housekeeper, clothes in disarray, the husband, gasping for breath in a locked room, the bed, broken. Isabel, standing behind me, began to sob. "Ma'am, I don't know how to explain." I turned to look at her. The tears were flowing freely, but her eyes weren't those of a terrified victim. They darted from me to Mike, then to the bed, as if she were waiting for my next move, my predictable, hysterical reaction. Mike struggled to speak. "Jess, listen to me." I held up a hand to stop him. Not because I didn't want to hear, but because I knew if I listened to a panicked explanation, I'd be dragged right into the narrative they wanted me to see. I slowly walked around the bed. The break in the leg wasn't a clean snap from top to bottom. It was splintered sideways, as if from a powerful, horizontal impact. There was a small button on the floor near the nightstand. Then, I saw a sliver of white paper peeking out from under the bed, from a brown legal folder whose tie had come undone. That tiny piece of paper pulled me back from the brink of shock. I knelt down and reached for the folder. The folder itself had a fresh crease, as if it had been fought over and thrown. When Mike saw it, his eyes widened, and he tried to speak. Isabel lunged forward. "Ma'am, don't open that. That's not for you." I clutched the folder to my chest and stared her down. "It's in my bedroom, under my bed. I have every right to know what it is." From downstairs, Eleanor's voice called up, "What's all that noise up there?" Isabel's sobs grew louder, more theatrical. "Mama Eleanor, help me." I stood in the middle of the room, holding the folder, my eyes fixed on the broken bed. I knew that if I lost my composure, this would instantly devolve into a cheap, sordid drama about a jealous wife. But if I stayed calm, the contents of this folder might reveal the truth someone was trying so desperately to bury. I'd always imagined that if I ever caught my husband in a compromising situation with another woman, I wouldn't be able to control myself. A woman's pain is often as deep as her love. But standing there, in that chaotic room, watching Isabel sob behind me, I felt a strange, cold calm. The scene felt too polished, too rehearsed. Mike sat on the floor, gasping, his eyes a mixture of terror and a desperate plea for help. Isabel was clutching her blouse, her sobs perfectly timed. "I'm scared, Mrs. Harrison," she whimpered. "I don't dare say what happened." I turned to her. "If you don't dare say it, then don't. Just stand still." She stopped, momentarily stunned. She probably expected me to lunge at her, to scream. If I had, the story would have immediately become one of jealousy. People are like that. The moment a woman gets hysterical, they forget to ask what caused her pain. I knelt to examine the bed leg. We'd had this bed for over 6 years, it was solid wood. For it to break from someone simply lying on it, the fracture should have been a vertical compression crack. But this was a lateral break, the screws ripped from the frame. There were scuff marks on the hardwood floor, and a glass of water from the nightstand had spilled. The button on the floor didn't match any of Mike's shirts. He was wearing a simple t-shirt. I picked it up. Isabel immediately stammered, That must have come off my blouse when I got scared." I looked at her. I didn't ask. One short sentence, and her face went even paler. I opened the folder. Inside was a stack of papers held together by a binder clip. The first page was a copy of the deed to our house. The second was a loan agreement for $75,000, with typed names for both Mike and me. The third was a power of attorney, granting control over the property if the loan wasn't repaid. The fourth page made my blood run cold. It was a signed statement, a waiver, declaring that I, Jessica Miller, voluntarily relinquished all financial claims related to the money my parents had contributed to the house renovation. Below was a signature. Jessica Miller. It was a good forgery, an 8 out of 10, but it wasn't mine. I sign contracts almost weekly. I know the pressure points of my own signature. This one looked right at a glance, but the final stroke was too heavy, the loop in the J was off. I flipped further and found a copy of my old driver's license and some lab results in Mike's name, for a serious-sounding condition, but the clinic name and patient ID didn't look right. To an uninformed eye, it was terrifying. To me, it smelled of a setup. Mike's voice was a rasp. "Jess, I didn't sign it. I swear, I didn't sign anything." I glanced at his right hand. There was a smear of blue ink on his thumb. A ballpoint pen lay on the floor near his feet. "Who brought this folder into our room?" Before he could answer, Isabel burst out, "Don't pressure him, ma'am. I'm the victim here. Look at me, look at what's happened to me. Why are you still asking about paperwork?" I stood up straight and looked at her carefully. Her blouse was rumpled, but not torn. Her hair was messy, but her skin wasn't scratched. There were plenty of tears, but her breathing was much steadier than Mike's. "If you're the victim," I said, my voice level, "I will call the police right now. We can give our statements and follow the proper procedure." Isabel fell silent. From the hallway, Eleanor's footsteps grew closer. I quickly took out my phone and started taking pictures of every document in the folder. I photographed the broken bed leg, the button, the pen on the floor, and Mike's slumped form. Isabel tried to grab my phone. "You can't take pictures. This is a private family matter." I stepped aside. When it involves a forged signature on a loan document in my name, it's no longer a private family matter. Just as Eleanor reached the doorway, Isabel threw herself at her, wailing, "Mama Eleanor, they're trying to frame me. I'm so scared." I looked at my mother-in-law, then at the folder on the nightstand. Whoever prepared this knew our family dynamics perfectly. My husband's weakness, my mother-in-law's biases, and how likely I was to explode. They wanted me to fly into a jealous rage. Instead, I chose to bend down and pick up the evidence. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her hand on the frame, her eyes scanning the room from Isabel, to Mike, and finally, to me. Her face at first showed genuine shock, but it vanished in an instant, like a curtain being yanked shut before the audience could see the backstage mess. Isabel clung to her arm, sobbing, "Mama, I don't know how I can go on. I just came up to get your sweater, and then..." She left the sentence hanging, a perfect, damning ellipsis. Eleanor whipped her head toward Mike. "Michael, what have you done to bring this shame upon our house?" Mike pushed himself up, but his legs were unsteady. His lips had a bluish tint. "Mom," he gasped, coughing, "it's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" She snapped. "Her clothes are a mess. You're in here with the door closed. What will the neighbors think?" If that was all she'd said, I might have believed she was just an outraged mother. But then her eyes fell on the folder in my hand, and her expression changed entirely. It wasn't the pained look of a mother whose son had erred. It was fear. The raw, angry fear of someone watching their deepest secret being unearthed in broad daylight. She strode forward. "What is that you're holding?" "A folder I found under our bed," I answered slowly. "Give it to me," she demanded, her hand outstretched. I held it tighter. "It has my name on it, a signature that looks like mine, a loan agreement, and a waiver of my financial rights. I need to know where it came from." Eleanor's voice rose to a shout. I said, "Give it to me. You have no right to go through things in this house." Her reaction was the final confirmation. If she were innocent, she would have asked, "What papers? Who brought them here?" Instead, her first instinct was to snatch the evidence. I took a step back, placed the folder on the dresser, and, turning my back for a second, took out my phone, started a voice recording, and set its screen down next to my jewelry box. "Mom, I am not giving this to anyone. From the moment I came home, everything in this room has been wrong. I suggest we all get this sorted out, right here, right now." Isabel's wails intensified. "Mrs. Harrison, please don't make a scene. I'm just an employee. I'm so scared." I looked at her. "If you're scared, then you should be telling the truth. You said you were the victim. If that's true, I will call the police and have them come take a formal report for you." Isabel froze. Eleanor jumped in. "Why would you call the police over a family matter? Do you want the whole neighborhood to know Mike is in trouble?" I turned to face her. "I'm not the one getting him in trouble. The person who staged this scene is." Hearing that, Mike buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. After all these years, I knew he was a terrible actor. If he had truly betrayed me, his eyes would be full of shame and avoidance. But right now, his eyes were filled with the terror of a man cornered. I walked to the door and locked it. The click echoed in the silent room. "What are you doing?" Eleanor gasped. "I'm locking it so no one leaves until this is clear," I said. "If you think I'm being unreasonable, Mom, I can call my brother, the community board president, and the local precinct. Sometimes an outside witness is for the best." Eleanor's teeth clenched. "Are you threatening me?" "No. I'm protecting myself." For the first time, my voice was calm and cold. For 13 years, I had bowed my head for the sake of peace. But there are times when if you bow any lower, you're just putting your neck under someone else's foot. I turned to Mike. "Tell me. What is this folder? Why is there a fake signature of mine? Why was Isabel in our room? And why did Mom try to grab these papers the moment she saw them?" Mike looked at his mother. Eleanor shot him a warning glare. "Michael, you're not well. Be quiet. Don't let her pressure you into saying something foolish." I picked up my phone, turned the screen on to show the recording in progress, and placed it on the dresser. "You can stay silent," I told him. "But if you do, I'm making that call right now. And then everything, the statements, the documents, the scene will become an official record. I no longer have enough trust to wait for an explanation after dinner." Mike's head dropped, a tear splashing onto the back of his hand. This man, who managed dozens of people at work, was crying like a child trapped between his wife and his mother. His voice was a hoarse whisper. "Jess. I'm sorry. I didn't cheat on you. Isabel. She was trying to force me to sign those papers. I wouldn't. So we struggled over the folder. The bed broke when I shoved it away, and it hit the leg. Then she pulled at her own shirt to make it look." "Mike, how can you say that?" Isabel shrieked. "You're scared of your wife, so you're blaming everything on me." Mike shook his head. "No, I'm done being quiet." That sentence silenced the room. Eleanor's face went white. "Michael, don't be a fool. Everything I did for you, for this house." I looked at her. With that one sentence, she had admitted everything. "What did you do for this house, Mom?" I asked slowly. She bit her lip, refusing to answer. Isabel, however, was now looking at Eleanor with a completely different expression. The subservient act was gone. Her eyes were as sharp and cold as a newly honed blade. I knew, in that moment, the charade was over. The co-conspirators were no longer on the same side. And when thieves start to fear each other, the truth has a way of finding its own way out. The moment Mike finished speaking, the room fell so quiet I could hear the slow drip of spilled water hitting the floor. Eleanor slumped into a chair, her hands clenched in her lap. Isabel stood near the door, her eyes darting between Eleanor and Mike, as if calculating her next move. I pulled over a chair and sat down, placing the folder in front of me. "Mike, start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." He swallowed hard. "About a year ago, Mom's brother, my Uncle Rick, convinced her to invest in a real estate deal in Florida. He said it was an inside track, a pre-development plot that would double in value in a few months. Mom was afraid you'd object, so she used her savings without telling anyone." Eleanor snapped. "I just wanted a little nest egg for my old age. Am I not allowed to have my own money without asking my daughter-in-law?" I looked at her. "I have never let you go without a thing, Mom. But you secretly invested the family's savings, and now there's a loan document with my name on it. Is that what you call a nest egg?" She was speechless. Mike continued. "At first, it was just her money. But then Uncle Rick said other investors were lining up and she'd lose her spot. He played on her pride, telling her he was giving her priority because she was his sister. So she went to her friends, people from church, even a few relatives, and told them she had a surefire investment. They gave her their money to invest for them. The money came in easily, but when the development stalled and the deeds never materialized, the investors came back to her just as quickly. Uncle Rick started dodging her calls. When people started showing up at our door, Eleanor panicked. The principal, plus the interest she'd promised them, and other money she'd borrowed to cover herself, added up to $75,000. I felt a chill run down my spine. An old woman, driven by pride and a desire to prove she was smarter than her daughter-in-law, had gotten herself into a massive debt. Worse, she hadn't just lost money, she had gambled with our family's reputation. "So where does Isabel fit in?" I asked. Mike glanced at Isabel. She quickly wiped a tear. "I just felt so bad for Mama Eleanor. She was so distressed, I only suggested a place where she could get a temporary loan." I gave a humorless laugh. "A temporary loan that required a forged document waiving my legal rights to this house?" Isabel looked down. Mike explained. "About 3 months ago, when the pressure from the other investors got intense, Isabel told Mom she knew a private lender who could get the money fast. But for a loan that big, they needed the house deed, signatures from all vested parties, and a written agreement that there were no other family claims on the property. Isabel knew about my parents' contribution because Eleanor had complained about it in a moment of anger. So, she concocted a plan to either trick me into signing a waiver, or forge one to use as leverage against me." Eleanor stammered. "I didn't want to hurt you, Jessica. I just thought we'd use the paper to get the loan, pay everyone back, and then it would be over." I looked my mother-in-law straight in the eye. "Mom, a knife in the hands of a criminal is no longer a kitchen tool. You knew that paper had my name on it, and you let them create it. You put me on the chopping block." Mike bowed his head. He admitted that 2 weeks earlier, he had found text messages between Eleanor and Isabel discussing the plan. When he confronted his mother, she broke down, saying if the investors sued, she couldn't bear the shame. Then Isabel started sending him short, distorted video clips of herself looking distressed outside our bedroom door, implying that he had behaved inappropriately. She threatened to send the clips to his company, to their clients, and even to the review pages of my spas if he didn't sign the loan papers. I turned to him. "And you stayed silent." He closed his eyes. I thought, I thought if I just handled it myself, I could protect the family. The words were so painfully familiar. Men sometimes think that hiding a problem from their wives is protecting them, but what they're really doing is leaving them standing in a storm, clueless that the roof is about to collapse. I looked at the folder on the dresser. The copy of the deed, the loan papers, the forged signature, each document was like a claw. If I hadn't come home early that day, if Mike had signed out of fear, if Isabel had released those clips, I would have been painted as a jealous, greedy wife trying to steal the house from her poor mother-in-law. At this point, if it were you, what would you do? When your own family uses your honor as collateral, do you stay silent for the sake of family? Or do you step into the light to reclaim your self-respect? The truth, I was learning, wasn't just about a $75,000 debt. There was a bigger question: who was really behind Isabel Garcia? What happened this afternoon? I asked Mike. He said Isabel had sent Eleanor downstairs on a pretext, then came to the room to see him alone. She brought the folder and demanded he sign. When he refused, they struggled. He tried to push the folder away, and it flew under the bed, hitting the bedpost and breaking it. Immediately after, Isabel tore open the buttons on her blouse, messed up her hair, and started to cry, just as I walked in. I turned to Eleanor. Did you know about this plan? Her lips trembled, but she still tried to justify herself. I just wanted to secure the house for Leo. A daughter-in-law can come and go, but Harrison Blood needs a place to call home. That sentence was colder than any crime. I stood up and gathered the papers. For the first time in my life as a daughter-in-law, I knew I could no longer excuse her behavior with the words, "She's old." The elderly are still accountable for their actions. The broken bed was still tilted to one side. But what was more broken was the last shred of trust I had in my husband and his mother. I laid each document from the folder on the dresser. The yellow light cast a sterile glow on the typed words, which felt like a death certificate for my faith in them. The $75,000 loan agreement. The power of attorney. The copy of the deed. And the waiver, stating I relinquished my claim to the money my parents invested. Each had a line for my signature, a signature so cleverly forged. I picked up the waiver and examined it again. The forger had clearly studied my signature but hadn't captured the motion, the flow. They had the shape, but not the spirit. I looked directly at Isabel. "Where did you get a sample of my signature?" She flinched, then looked down. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just the help. I do what I'm told." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Just the help, but you knew this folder wasn't for me to see, you knew to start crying at the perfect moment, and you knew exactly how to make your clothes look distressed. You're wasted as a housekeeper." Isabel's face flushed with anger, but she said nothing. It was Mike who spoke, his voice hoarse. 3 weeks ago, Isabel went with Mom to your spa in Queens. Mom said her shoulder was hurting and wanted a massage. You weren't there, just your staff. I remembered. I was at the Brooklyn location that day. Eleanor rarely visited my spas, but that day, she had insisted. I had even felt a flicker of hope, thinking she was finally softening towards my work. It turned out she had another motive. I looked at Isabel. "You went into the office that day, didn't you?" She shook her head vigorously. "No. I sat in the waiting area with Mama Eleanor. I immediately called my spa manager, Sarah. My voice was so calm it surprised even me. Sarah, can you check the security footage from about 3 weeks ago, the day my mother-in-law came in for a massage? Check the area around the office file cabinet. If the footage is still there, pull it for me." Sarah understood from my tone that it was serious and said she'd do it right away. Eleanor grew agitated. "Why are you calling your employees? You're making a mountain out of a molehill." "A forged signature on a $75,000 loan is not a molehill, Mom," I replied. Mike continued. "Isabel had also gone into our bedroom multiple times, using the excuse of getting laundry. Once, he'd found her near the nightstand drawer where I kept a copy of my old driver's license and some insurance papers. She'd claimed she was looking for a bottle of Eleanor's pills." As he spoke, the pieces clicked into place. The spare key. The file cabinet at the spa. My personal documents. Nothing was an accident. I turned to my mother-in-law. "You told Isabel about my parents' contribution to the house." Eleanor pursed her lips. "I might have mentioned it. I was upset, and it just came out. I never thought she'd take it this far." Isabel exploded. "You can't be serious. You were the one who said, 'Jessica thinks she owns a piece of this house just because her parents threw in a little money.' You were the one who said we needed to find a way to make her leave on her own." The room went dead silent. Eleanor glared at her. "You shut your mouth," I took pity on you, gave you a place to live. Isabel laughed, a cold, sharp sound. You pitied me, or you needed me. Without me, who would have put these papers together? Who would have found you a lender? I watched the two of them, my mother-in-law, and the housekeeper, who had so recently been allies in a plot against me. Now, with their interests diverging, they were turning on each other. Mike buried his face in his hands. Mom. How could you say you wanted Jess to leave? Eleanor turned on her son, her eyes red. I was trying to protect the house for you. For Leo. That woman is successful. What if one day she decides to leave you? This is a Harrison house. We can't let her family have a claim to it. Hearing her refer to me as, that woman, felt like a slap. 13 years of calling her, Mom. Only to learn that in her heart, I was nothing more than an outsider. I spoke slowly, each word deliberate. I have never tried to take this house. I only ever wanted my family's contribution, and my own, to be acknowledged. But you chose to forge documents to force me to give up something I was never even fighting for. Eleanor turned away, refusing to answer. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a video file from Sarah. The clip showed Isabel near the file cabinet at the spa. When the receptionist turned to help a client, Isabel quickly opened a drawer, pulled out a file, and rapidly photographed the pages with her phone before slipping it back. I held up the phone for everyone to see. Isabel's face went ashen. Do you still want to claim you know nothing? I asked. She bit her lip, her silence a confession. I put my phone away, gathered the documents, and looked at Mike. Listen to me carefully. If I had flown into a rage this afternoon, slapped her, and stormed out, by tomorrow, the entire family would be saying I was a jealous, unstable wife. Your mother would have had the perfect excuse to push for a divorce, keep the house, and paint me as the one who abandoned her family. Mike bowed his head, tears streaming down his face. I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness. A home that has to be defended with forged papers, fake tears, and trampled dignity isn't a home at all. It's just a beautiful facade, rotting from the inside. I picked up my phone and dialed my older brother, David. My voice was clear and steady. David, I need you to come over. Now. I have documents with a forged signature, video evidence of theft, and signs of coercion and slander. I need a member of my family here as a witness. After I hung up, I looked at my mother-in-law, at Isabel, and at Mike. I knew, from that moment on, no one could ever again use the words, family matter, to shut me up. After the call to my brother, David, I didn't say much more. The air in the room was thick with the smell of sweat, the cooling chicken soup downstairs, and the faint, chemical scent of floor cleaner. It was a bizarre tableau, the broken bed, my husband on a chair, my mother-in-law looking defeated, and the housekeeper, a cornered animal. I put the folder of documents in my dresser and locked it in front of everyone. Eleanor shot up from her seat. What are you doing? Those are papers from my house. They have my forged signature and a loan in my name, I replied. From now on, no one touches them without a witness present. She gritted her teeth. Do you really want to humiliate this family so badly? I looked at her, my heart aching, but my voice firm. No one brings humiliation on this family more than the person who plants forged documents in their daughter-in-law's bedroom. Mike struggled to stand, swaying on his feet. I pulled a chair over for him. As angry as I was, I couldn't just let him collapse. The bond of marriage isn't a light switch you can just flip off. But compassion didn't mean I was going to be a fool any longer. I opened the bedroom door, but stood blocking the exit. No one is leaving this house until my brother and a neutral party get here. Isabel immediately whispered. Mrs. Harrison, please, I feel dizzy. Can I go downstairs? If you're dizzy, sit in that chair, I said, pointing. The police will be here shortly. You can tell them exactly how you were victimized. She froze, not daring to move. 20 minutes later, my brother arrived. He was still in his work clothes, clearly having rushed over. He took in the scene, his expression hardening, but he didn't yell or demand answers. He just put a hand on my shoulder. Jess, stay calm. What's on paper, we keep on paper. What's on video, we save. Don't get into a shouting match. That one sentence made me feel like I could stand up straight again. My family didn't need to be loud, they just needed to be there. I showed him the photos I'd taken, the loan documents, the forged signature, and the video of Isabel at the spa. After he'd seen it all, he turned to Eleanor. Ma'am, with all due respect, this is beyond a family squabble now. There are signs of forgery and coercion. We should let the authorities document this. Eleanor's tone immediately changed to one of pleading. David, you're Jessica's brother. You should advise her. If this gets out, it will ruin Mike's reputation, and it will be terrible for Leo. My brother's voice was calm but firm. Ma'am, it's precisely because of Leo that this needs to be clear. A child shouldn't grow up in a house where adults use each other's honor as a shield. She had no reply. A little later, a patrol car arrived with 2 officers. I didn't give a long, emotional story. I laid out the facts in order. I came home, heard a noise, found Isabel emerging from my bedroom in a disheveled state, saw my husband and the broken bed, and discovered a folder of documents with a suspected forged signature. One of the officers reminded me, "Ma'am, just use the phrase signs of or suspected. The investigation will determine the facts." I nodded. I remembered that. When the officer asked for individual statements, Isabel's story began to change. At first, she stuck to her victim narrative, but when asked to explain the loan documents, she faltered. Eleanor quickly interjected, "She's new here, she must have been put up to it by someone. I'm an old woman, I don't know anything about these kinds of papers." Hearing that, Isabel's head snapped up, her face no longer pitiful. "How can you say that, Mama? You told me to find a way to get money. You gave me the house deed. You told me Mrs. Harrison's parents had put money into the house. And now you're blaming it all on me?" Eleanor shrieked. "You be quiet. I took you in, gave you food and shelter, and you repay me by trying to ruin me." Isabel laughed, a cold, chilling sound. "You needed me to do your dirty work. Don't pretend it was charity. I still have the text messages where you asked me to find a way to humiliate Mrs. Harrison, so she would leave on her own." The room went silent. Mike buried his face in his hands. I looked at my mother-in-law, her lips trembled, but no sound came out. I turned to the officer. "Sir, I would like that last statement noted. I request to submit the text messages, photos, security footage, and these documents as evidence." The officer nodded and wrote it down. Eleanor finally broke down and cried, not with anger, but with the despair of someone who has fallen into a pit of their own digging. "Jessica, I'm old," she manipulated me. "I was just so scared of losing the house, scared that one day Leo would have nowhere to go." I heard the words, "I'm old," and felt a deep, weary ache. So many times, that phrase had been used to silence me. But old age cannot be a shield for wrongdoing. "You were worried about your grandson," I said. "But you were willing to let his mother be falsely accused, shamed, and driven from her home. That's not protecting your grandson, Mom. That's using him." She bowed her head. An initial police report was filed that afternoon. I signed my name, with my real signature, and felt a lump in my throat. One true signature to protect myself from a dozen false ones. When everyone had left, the container of chicken noodle soup I had bought for Mike was still sitting on the counter, cold. I looked at it for a moment, then quietly poured it down the drain. Some things, when they grow cold, can be reheated. But trust, once it's been used as bait, can't be warmed up again with a few simple words of apology. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, but it wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the silence after a hurricane, when not everything is destroyed, but everyone knows the roof has been torn open. Mike had slept in Leo's room. I was alone in our bedroom, the broken bed propped up with a stack of old books. I didn't call a handyman. I wanted to leave it as a reminder that some fractures shouldn't be hidden too quickly. Around 7 a.m., my phone started ringing. It was Mike's Uncle Jim. The one who had witnessed the signing of the notarized letter years ago. "Jessica?" he said with a heavy sigh. "Your mother-in-law called. She said there was a big incident, that you caught Mike with the housekeeper and made a huge scene, even called the police." The narrative had already been twisted. "Uncle Jim," I said, "it's not that simple. There were forged documents and a loan agreement in my bedroom. I asked the police to make a report." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm not taking sides, but family business should be kept in the family. Bringing outsiders in just makes everyone look bad." It was the same old advice. Whenever a woman is wronged, she's told to protect the family's image, while her own dignity is treated like a dish rag, to be rinsed out and used again. "I wanted to keep it in the family, Uncle," I replied calmly. "But when someone in the family forges my signature and tries to frame me to drive me from my home, the family door isn't strong enough to contain that kind of truth." He just told me to think carefully and hung up. The calls kept coming all morning. One aunt told me, "A smart woman knows when to yield. Even if your husband makes a mistake, you have a son together. Even if your mother-in-law is difficult, she's still his mother." I looked down at my hand. A smudge of blue ink was still on my thumb from signing the police report. "I have yielded for 13 years. I told her. I yielded to keep the peace at the dinner table, to keep the family together. But if yielding means I become a debtor, a jealous shrew, and an outcast, then I can't yield anymore. The line went silent. Some callers advised me, others blamed me. They said I had gotten successful, and looked down on my husband's family. They said my business relied on reputation, and scandal would hurt me more than anyone. The narrative was always the same. I was the one who had rocked the boat. Around noon, I went down to make Leo some lunch. He sat at the kitchen table, unusually quiet. Normally, he'd be chattering about school, about friends, about video games. "Are you feeling okay, sweetie?" I asked. He shook his head, then said, "The house just feels weird." A simple observation from a child, but it hit me like a punch. I ruffled his hair. "The grown-ups have some things to sort out. But you just need to remember that mom loves you, dad loves you, and none of this is your fault." He looked up at me, his eyes wide. "Is grandma mad at you?" I didn't want to speak ill of her in front of him. No matter how angry I was, a child should never be used as a weapon. "Grandma is sad and confused right now," I said. "But the adults will figure out what's right and what's wrong." That evening, my brother David came over again. He brought a new set of folders and helped me organize the evidence. Financial records, forged documents, security footage, text messages, audio recordings, witness lists. "Jess," he said, "stop explaining yourself to every relative who calls. From now on, just say the matter is being handled legally. The more you talk, the more they'll twist your words. We'll speak with documents, not arguments." I nodded. After 13 years of being a daughter-in-law, I have to protect myself like I'm closing a business deal. David sighed. "That's because some people treat family bonds as if they're worth less than a contract." That night, Eleanor stayed in her room. Mike brought a tray of food up to her, and when he came down, his face was haggard. "She says you're trying to put her in jail." I didn't look up from my papers. "Is that what you think?" He was silent for a long time. "No," he finally said. "But I'm scared." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. "You're scared for your mother. You're scared of what the relatives will say. You're scared of what your company will think. What about me? Am I not allowed to be scared?" He bowed his head. "I'm scared my son will hear people call his mother a deadbeat," I continued. "I'm scared a forged signature will become a real debt. I'm scared that I'll wake up one day and be kicked out of the home I helped build. My fear is real, Mike. It's not something you can just tell me to let go of anymore." He couldn't say a word. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table. I suddenly remembered all the years I had sat at that same table, swallowing my hurt feelings to keep the peace. But peace bought at the price of your dignity is too expensive. I turned off my phone's ringer, but I kept it on to receive texts and record calls. I no longer needed to win arguments. I needed to build a case. I understood now that rumors are like smoke, they drift and spread with the slightest breeze. But the truth, if documented in black and white, will eventually see the light of day. 3 days after the incident, just as I was dropping Leo off at school, my phone rang. It was Sarah, my manager from the Queen's Spa. Her voice was shaking. "Jess, there are 2 strange men standing outside. They're filming the entrance and telling people walking by that you're a debtor who won't pay up." My hand tightened on the steering wheel. "Have you said anything to them?" "No, I told security not to engage. But a few clients heard them, and they're getting nervous. One asked me if the spa was being sued." "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "Save all the security footage. Get their license plate if you can. Under no circumstances is anyone to argue with them. I'm on my way." I drove to the spa in 20 minutes. The world outside was normal, but inside me, a storm was raging. When I arrived, the men were gone, but the tension was thick. My staff looked terrified. A loyal client pulled me aside. "Jessica, what's going on? They were saying you were running from a debt." I was so shocked. I forced a smile. "Someone is intentionally trying to damage my reputation. The matter is with my lawyer and the police. Please don't worry, we're operating as usual." She nodded, but I knew that once a seed of doubt is planted, it doesn't just disappear. I gathered my staff. They were young, they had rent to pay, families to support. My personal drama had no right to jeopardize their livelihoods. "Listen to me," I said. "This spa owes no one any money. This is a personal attack against me. From now on, if anyone shows up causing trouble, you do not engage. Log the time, save the footage, and let me and my lawyer handle it. If a client asks, you say one thing. The spa is operating normally, and any false rumors are being addressed legally. Do not elaborate. One of the youngest receptionists looked at me, her eyes welling up. We believe you, Jess. That one sentence almost broke me. The world could doubt me, but my team, the people who worked with me every day, they still had faith. I went into my office and closed the door. Only then did I let myself cry. I cried for my business, for the years of hard work, for the fact that it was all being used as a weapon against me because of greed. After a few minutes, I washed my face, reapplied some lipstick, and stood up straight. I called my brother to report the harassment. I called my lawyer, who advised me to document everything as evidence of defamation and business interference. That evening, I went home to find Mike waiting in the living room. Is the spa okay? He asked quietly. I looked at him. It's still standing. But if I had shown any weakness today, 20 people who depend on me would have panicked. He lowered his head. I'm sorry. Don't just say you're sorry anymore, Mike, I said, my voice weary. If you want to fix this, do something. Give me the text messages where Isabel threatened you. Hand them over to the lawyer. Stop hiding things. He was silent for a moment, then nodded. Eleanor emerged from her room. You run a business, you're bound to have haters, she said dismissively. Don't blame everything on me. I turned to her. Don't worry, Mom, I said softly. I won't blame, I'll prove. She flinched. Perhaps she was used to the Jessica who would back down, not the Jessica who was now quietly building her case. That night, I added a new file to my evidence folder. The security footage from the spa, screenshots of concerned client messages, a log of cancelled appointments. Each piece was another brick in the wall I was building to protect my name. The battle had moved out of the bedroom and onto my doorstep. I knew I couldn't afford to fall. Behind me was not just a broken marriage, but my son, my employees, and a decade of my life's work. I would not let anyone tarnish it and expect me to quietly clean up their mess. The next morning, I sat down at my computer. I pulled up the feed from the house's security cameras. The footage from the day of the incident was clear. Downstairs, Eleanor and Isabel moved about normally. Then, at 4:10 p.m., Isabel went out to the back patio to take a phone call. She didn't look panicked at all. The front gate camera also showed no one else had entered the house. The whole thing was an inside job. Then I checked the camera for the second floor hallway. At exactly 4:06 p.m., the feed went black. It wasn't a network issue. All the other cameras were working. At 4:40 p.m., exactly 34 minutes later, the feed came back on. 34 minutes. Long enough to stage a struggle, break a bed, and prepare the tears. I called Mike over. Who knows how to disable the upstairs camera? He was quiet. Me, Mom. And, when Isabel first started, Mom showed her the local circuit breaker in the hallway closet. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. My own home, and the new housekeeper knew how to disable its eyes. Later, my brother David came over. I showed him everything. He just took notes, logging the times. This is crucial, he said. Save the original files. Make 2 backups. One for the lawyer. That afternoon, my lawyer, Mr. Klein, came to the house. When he was about to leave, Mike called me upstairs. He stood by the window, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Jess, he said, there's one more thing. He handed me his phone. It was an audio file, recorded 4 days before the incident. I pressed play. First, I heard Eleanor's voice. She'll never sign it willingly. That woman is too stubborn. Then, Isabel's voice, quiet but clear. If she won't sign, then we create a scene she can't think her way out of. What woman stays calm when she finds her husband in a room with another woman? The moment she makes a scene and runs home to her family, the rest will be easy. My heart seized. Eleanor spoke again. As long as she leaves this house, I can tell everyone she was a jealous, disrespectful wife. Mike loves his son, he'll listen to me eventually. I stopped the recording. The room spun. Mike stood before me, his eyes red. I overheard them talking, he whispered. I recorded it secretly. I was going to confront Mom, but then she started crying, and Isabel sent the threatening texts, and I got scared. I stared at him for a long, long time. You had this. You had this proof in your hand, and you let me walk into that room like prey walking into a snare. He bowed his head, sobbing. I thought if I kept quiet, I could protect Mom, protect the house. Protect you from being dragged into it. I laughed, and my own tears started to fall. Mike, your silence in the face of evil isn't protection. It's an invitation for evil to walk right in. I took his phone, transferred the audio file to my own devices, and sent copies to my brother and my lawyer. This time, he didn't stop me. He knew it was too late to hide behind the excuse of being a good son. That night, I sat on the stairs. I felt a different kind of pain now. It wasn't just the pain of a hateful mother-in-law or a manipulative housekeeper. It was the pain of knowing the man I had relied on had chosen to stay silent when I needed him to stand up the most. And some silences, I now knew, are more damaging than the loudest betrayal. The next day, I was 10 minutes late picking Leo up from school. He was standing under a tree by the gate, his backpack slung over one shoulder. When he saw me, he didn't run over like he usually did. He walked slowly, his head down. "Bad day, sweetie?" I asked. He just shook his head. I took him to his favorite pizza place. He just stared at his slice, picking off the pepperoni one by one. I put my hand on his. "You can tell me, Leo." His eyes filled with tears. "Mom, a kid at school, Mark, he asked if you owe people money. He said his dad saw a video of men yelling in front of your spa." My heart broke. The mess the adults had made was now wounding my child. I kept my voice steady. "I don't owe anyone money, honey. Someone is telling lies about me, and I'm handling it with the police and our lawyer." Leo looked down again. "Then why did Grandma tell me you're trying to steal her house?" I couldn't breathe. I knew Eleanor was angry, but I never imagined she would say such a thing to her own grandson. My son was only 12. He didn't understand property disputes or greed, but he understood pain. "When did she tell you that?" I asked softly. "This morning. She said that now that you have money, you want to take the Harrison house. She said I'm her grandson, and I have to remember to stand with my family." I looked at the pizza on the table, suddenly feeling sick. Leo's voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, if Grandma says you're an outsider, then am I an insider or an outsider?" I pulled him into my arms, right there in the middle of the pizzeria. I didn't care who was watching. A child's question can cut deeper than any insult. I whispered in his ear. "You are my son and Dad's son. You are not on anyone's side. You don't have to choose between Grandma's family and my family. You just have to choose what's right and be a good person." He hugged me tightly, his little body trembling. That night, I didn't confront Eleanor. Instead, I went up to the den and looked at the photo of my late father-in-law, Arthur, on the mantel. "Dad," I whispered, "if you ever cared for me, please give me the strength to protect my son." As I was dusting, I noticed an old wooden box tucked away on a shelf. Arthur used to keep old papers in it. I opened it. Inside were old photos, faded receipts from the renovation, a copy of the notarized letter acknowledging my parents' contribution, and at the very bottom, an envelope with Mike's name on it. I brought it downstairs. Mike opened it slowly. It was a letter from his father. In it, Arthur wrote that this house was built not just with Harrison money, but with my hard work, my parents' life savings, and the love of our combined families. He instructed Mike to never, ever let me be treated like a guest in my own home. He ended with a line that made Mike burst into tears. "A man who doesn't protect his own wife can't be surprised when the world doesn't respect her." Mike held the letter, his shoulders slumped in shame. "I failed you, Jess," he sobbed. "I failed my dad. I failed our son." That night, Mike wrote a full, detailed statement. He documented everything: when he learned of his mother's debt, the threats from Isabel, the secret audio recording. He signed it and sent it, along with all the evidence from his phone, to my lawyer. I hadn't forgiven him, it wouldn't be that easy, but for the first time, he wasn't just saying sorry. He was taking action. Before bed, I looked in on Leo. He was asleep, clutching an old toy car. I pulled his blanket up and made a silent promise. I would see this through to the end, not to win a fight, but to make sure my son grew up knowing his mother never stole, never hid, and never, ever backed down from the truth. The confrontation took place that Sunday in our living room. I had my lawyer, my brother, the police, and several family members from both sides present. I laid out every piece of evidence on the coffee table. The forged documents, the security footage, the text messages, the audio recording, my parents' bank statements, my father-in-law's notarized letter, and his final letter to Mike. The room was heavy with a silence broken only by Eleanor's quiet sobs and Isabel's defiant glares. When confronted with the recording of their plan, they turned on each other, spitting accusations. The relatives who had told me to be quiet and yield now sat in stunned silence. Uncle Rick, who had started the whole mess, was confronted by other investors I had tracked down who had also showed up. In the end, a comprehensive report was filed. The aftermath was swift. Eleanor had to sell a property she owned to pay back the investors. Isabel was investigated for fraud and extortion, and we learned she had a history of preying on vulnerable families. Uncle Rick faced legal trouble for his shady land deal. Mike and I started therapy. He was learning how to be a partner, not just a son. I moved out with Leo to a small apartment near my Queen's spa. I wasn't ready to go back, not yet. I needed to heal, and he needed to prove he had changed. We let Leo visit his grandmother, but I set firm boundaries. No more talk of sides, no more poison. The house in Queens, the source of so much pain, was put up for sale. We would split the proceeds fairly, with my parents' contribution returned to them first. Sometimes, I think about that broken bed. It didn't destroy my life. It shattered the pretty facade of my family, revealing the greed, weakness, and manipulation that had been festering underneath. A woman can be patient, she can be kind, she can yield for the sake of peace. But she should never yield so much that she loses herself. And a home isn't defined by whose name is on the deed. It's defined by the people inside who are willing to protect and respect one another.